Well, hello. My name is Mia Smith, and I am the Director of Fellowships and Program at the American Association of University Women. Welcome, everyone, to our webinar today titled, Black Women Leading Through an Equity Lens. Before we get started, I want to go through a couple of virtual etiquette rules. Number one, everyone should be on mute. Number two, we want to use the chat box for technical questions. And number three, use the question box for substantive questions. So today's agenda, we're pleased to welcome Stephanie Jackson and Kimberly Sisnet, two corporate trailblazers who have navigated career paths in male-dominated environments for a conversation about leadership. We are currently experiencing a shift in America, and the demand for equity is at its core, the basis of the unrest. Our panelists lead with an equity lens in their professional roles, impacting millions of customers daily. Inquiring minds want to know, how do you lead with equity to affect sustainable change? So equity, just to make sure we're all on the same page, it is a pursuit of being fair and impartial. Our panelists will describe equity from their lens, how it's developed, nurtured, and implemented in the workplace, and share best practices on what we can do to advocate for ourselves and our colleagues to bolster equitable practices that foster equity for all. So let me tell you a little bit about our wonderful panelists. Number one, first up, we have Kimberly Sisnet. She is the Senior Vice President of People at Veracast, where she leads the learning and development, diversity and inclusion, talent acquisition, employee engagement, and business partner teams. She is responsible for aligning human capital initiatives with business objectives for overall achievement of strategy and vision while addressing the needs and aspirations of the employees across Veracast. Next, we have Stephanie Jackson. And Stephanie has over 20 years of experience designing, implementing, and managing operation risk programs in financial services firms. She has extensive experience interpreting regulations, managing large teams of multidisciplinary experts in different countries and functions, and designing and implementing second line of defense efforts for the Business Resilience Group. Stephanie is responsible for leading efforts associated with business continuity, planning for all of Facebook's regulated functions and products. Kimberly, Stephanie, and I will have a conversation about the topic at hand. And if there's time, we will open up for a few questions. Additionally, I just wanted to say that we want to thank participants that submitted questions in advance, and we worked real hard to try to incorporate some of those questions throughout this dialogue. So to kick things off, I'm going to ask both Kimberly and Stephanie to provide brief remarks about why it's important to tell their story as an African-American woman, a leader, and advocate for equity. So, Stephanie, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Thank you, Mia, and thank you for putting this together. I'm very excited to be here. One of the things that I always, when I reflect back on my career, I always say, I wish I knew what I know now then. So that's why I was excited. I'm excited to be here to share some lessons learned. Some were positive, and I did very well by them, and some with some hard lessons to learn. So anything that we can do to help each other through our career journey, I think we have an obligation to do that. Often it's said, too much is given, much more is expected. So, I really do feel that any information that we can communicate today that may help someone in the interview, may help someone deal with a manager, just sharing knowledge that I've gained over the years through working at various positions. So that's why
I'm. Kimberly?
Sure. Stephanie, very nice to meet you. And Mia, thank you for the opportunity to participate today. It's Stephanie, something you just said, too much is basically it's about the responsibility, I think, and what you would tell, if I'm interpreting right, your younger self, right? And that knowledge that you pass on. And, I think as leaders in general, sharing stories is one of the most powerful ways to influence, to teach, to inspire. And I found that when you can share lived experiences, it has the power to break down walls, right? So you talk about equity and advocating for equity. Those lived experiences, lead to deeper connections, right? Deeper connections with your colleagues, with your friends. And so as a Black woman, as a leader, as an advocate for equity, sharing my story and experiences really goes beyond those walls, right? And it goes beyond those walls to create connection. And in my experience, right, and I always think about how to go back in time if I could talk to my younger self, but in my experience with people of color, sharing those stories actually gives them hope, right? It's a sense of pride. It's confidence that, yes, I can do this. And for non-people of color, storytelling is the beginning of what I call a journey toward understanding that not all things are created equal, right? So there's a big difference between equity and equality. And as a Black woman, being able to advocate for equity is not a one-time thing. As Stephanie shared, you're always telling stories. This is a journey. It's a commitment, and it's present with me every day that I come to work, every part of my life, and now in my role as Senior Vice President of HR, it's actually become who I am at the core because I'm responsible. I hold myself personally responsible for making sure that within my company, we are staying true to not only our values, but making sure that the playing field is equitable for everyone to advance.
Thank you, ladies. That's pretty awesome. What a way to kind of start us off. So we're just going to move right into the questions. And I think the way we'll do this, I guess, is just I'll ask the question and, you guys can just dive right into it. So the first question I have, and I think I'll just go back and to Stephanie. If you can talk a bit about what equity in the workplace means to you as a Black woman and how that vision is rolled out in your positions. So you've kind of given us an overview, but how is that rolled out in your position and hiring practices and business practices? And then the other piece of that is what professional resources have you used to assist with that implementation?
Thank you for the question, Mia. I'm going to dovetail and combine my experience with at Citigroup and Facebook. To me, having equity as a leader is having a seat at the table. And not just having a seat at the table, but having a voice at the table. So sometimes they'll let you in the room, but do you have a voice? And there's a lot we have to do, or a lot we need to do to be successful of that. For one, get comfortable with the idea as Black women, every day you have to prove yourself to be smart. With some of our other cultures are assumed to be smart. So once you have the seat at the table, how do you obtain that voice? And self-awareness is important. For me, I've always had to work through being very direct. Some people find that intimidating. So you need to find a way to be disarming so that people want to partner with you, to grow your career as an individual and hear your views. So once you have the seat at the table, then we can begin to talk about equity. I worked in mostly male-dominated fields, knowing my pay and bonuses, if you're in the bonus area, they're quite different. But you can't have a chip on your shoulder. You have to think about what am I contributing? I would like to tell my teams, how are you moving the needle? Not for you, but for your team. What are the company's goal? What is my boss's goal? What is your goal? And how do they come together? How can I help you get to the next level as you're helping me either maintain or go up another level? So it's basically about knowing your surroundings, knowing the culture of the company. Every company is different. Citigroup is very structured, very regulated. Facebook, I work for Control Risk, to clarify that, which is a consulting firm, and Facebook is our full-time client. And when I came over to Facebook, I felt like I went to corporate heaven. Totally different structure. Not somewhere you generally would wear a suit or heels. Very open to diversity of thought, very diverse, but a lot more work to do when it comes to hiring people of color in both leadership and middle management positions. So to me, having a seat at the table, having a voice, and once you have that voice, having a relevant message that really relates to the company you're working for, the goals of the company, the goals of the boss, and your goals. Putting that all together then gives you a lot of power to influence. And the other thing I found that people do is you never want to talk about money during budget season or when it's time for your review. As a manager, when you get in your review, you'll say, okay, you have 3% across. Everyone in your group, you have a 3% average. So you want to give your top performer 6%. So you're going to take away from someone else to make sure you can meet the number for your top performer. So you'll always want to have that conversation on compensation off cycle. Okay. And you always want to make sure, I'm melding this. My last thing is we always want to make sure your goals are what we call SMART. Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time sensitive, time bound. And a good manager will work with you to make sure you achieve those things.
Well, I love the fact, Stephanie, you gave us insight, and then as far as professional resources to assist with implementation, you did talk about SMART goals. So making sure that when you're at the table, you can be specific and you're given measurable and attainable insight to leadership persons that have the ability to implement change. Kimberly, how about you? What is equity workplace means, and what's your perspective?
So, I guess personally and professionally, being the lead of HR, I better put my money where my mouth is, right? And so, equity in the workplace means that people have equal access to opportunities, which creates an advantageous environment for both the employee and the employer, right? That's not aspirational. That's proven to be the key to business success, right? And so, before joining Veracast, I spent 7+ years at working for a global IT company, right? And I was their SVP of HR. It took about 2 years to formally and fully launch a D&I program, a diversity and inclusion program. And it started, just to give you a little bit of history to talk about this journey, it started as the Women's Network. Then it went into ERGs, employee resource groups, under that D&I umbrella. And then it stalled, right? It just flattened out because it was from the bottom up, and there was no top-down approach to it, and it wasn't connected to the overall strategy. And so when I moved into the SVP role, and this is a key point here, I was the only Black executive leader in the entire 40,000 person global organization. So I anticipated that the narrative would be, of course, Kimberly is going to want to do this D&I thing because she's the only Black woman, right? It wasn't said to me, but it's what I felt. So I decided to change the approach completely and focus purely on data. So I dismantled the committee, and yes, I upset many people. The organization went into shock, and I decided to seek people in the business outside of the HR team. I went into the business and pulled 2 people to work with me on resetting and recalibrating. It was a VP of IT and a program manager. And it was a method to the madness in that they too were very data driven and also respected by the organization. So the 3 things that I did was, change the strategy to focus on our processes, right? Processes and policies. If you think about it, we have tons of policies across every organization, but yet you look around and there's no diversity. Leadership and HR training, and then tying that work back into the D&I strategy. And so when I say D&I, I'm referring to the equity work that is inclusive of D&I. So I hired a consultant, and you asked me, the question was, how do you get this done? So I hired a consultant to help with our equity audit. And I did that because, again, I still need to evaluate the strength of my own HR team, right? I need to know that my team is able to be consistent in application of these processes and policies that we put forth, so there's an unbiased view. So I hired an external consultant to do our equity audit and help with how we recruit, how we train, how we promote. To Stephanie's point about you never lead with money, right? But if it is not incumbent upon the individual to fight for equal pay. It's incumbent upon the organization to make sure we have equal practices in place, so everyone is being paid according to their competencies consistently, regardless of what you look like. And so there was a lot of work done there. I added unconscious bias training, and I infused that into what we call our leadership development programs. And these were easy things that I could do in the beginning. And I changed our intern program to focus on HBCUs as well, right? So we added that to our rotation. So that was the first part of the equity work. The interesting thing I learned, and as you do more equity work, it's sometimes amazing how something simple could be an aha moment. So one thing I learned is that the way job descriptions are actually written can actually deter people from applying, right? And so it's not just gender; it's also socioeconomic and other challenges that people look at an organization and decide that they're not going to join. And so we did a lot of work to kind of change the way that our job descriptions were written. And so again, this is just an easy example of what equity work looks like. So companies who value diversity will attract and retain employees longer. They will have a more diverse workforce. And having had this experience in the past allowed me to sort of fast track the journey that I'm on now with this new company. So again, same strategy, change the process and the policies. Since I'm the leader of HR, it's really easy to do that. In terms of training, getting the buy-in from the leaders to understand and be accountable, because it's not just the bottoms up approach, it's a top down approach. And then the hardest part to get across the goal line was then tying the D&I strategy to the business strategy, because that's really where you make people uncomfortable, because we're tying it into metrics, we're tying it into our business results, but that's really the key to then holding leaders accountable. So equity, as I mentioned, it's in my role as HR, I take it personally and professionally. Personally and professionally, it's a serious thing in terms of what I represent and what I'm able to apply across the organization for the employees.
Wow, both of you guys just kind of share really powerful stuff, and I think part of it is what I'm hearing is sort of personal accountability that each one of you feel in your roles. And then also tying it back to just good business and good business practice. So having succeeded, in male-dominated field, what have been your greatest obstacles and how did you overcome them? I'm going to kick it back.
Want me to go first or Stephanie? Oh, okay.
Whoever.
Kick it back to Stephanie.
Stephanie?
Sure. I would have to say both companies are global. More so earlier in my career, it took quite an adjustment when you're dealing with different cultures. You really need to do your homework. When I was in Asia, you have to work differently to get honest feedback because they're very polite. So you might be doing a training or leading a session and think you're doing a great job. And when you get back to New York, you might get a bad review. The other areas was with Indian culture. The men, one would not look me direct in the eye, and if I was with another man, would not accept an answer from me.
Wow.
So you have to not make it about race. You have to not take it personally and understand it's their culture and do little things along the way. One, it's very important to build relationship and credibility. So find common points of interest to start building the credibility. And two, I started having meetings without other men in the room so that they would be more inclined, if they weren't going to look at me, at least listen to what I had to say. And third thing is, if people know that you're in it to work with them, to help them be successful, they're willing to partner with you. But the challenges I've had really have been around the global view, being able to adapt to people, different cultures, and the way people interact with women, particularly with my size and my demeanor. So that was part of my journey.
Wow.
Also, at the time I was at Citigroup, we had 200,000 employees in 96 countries. So I had oversight of corporate functions for business continuity, and I was the only female in the group. My peers were all male. So when they adjust your salary without you asking, that tells you how much you're being underpaid. But then again, it's about having a voice. So when you're in these meetings, it can be everyone wants to establish their brand, make a presence. Sometimes people are not open to diversity of thought. So you really have to figure out a way without offending people to get yourself heard. And you do that by building personal relationships. Who comes in early? So I come in early, have coffee, talk about work. Who stays late? Would like to have a beer, a glass of wine. Talk about sports. You do those things so that you can have the professional relationship you need to be successful at work. You don't have to be friends with everyone, but you do need to be friendly and approachable.
Wow. Thanks. And friendly, approachable, and adaptable.
Exactly.
Kimberly?
Yeah, I can relate to so many of those experiences, Stephanie, right? My former company was owned by Japanese, but when we merged, I was part of the company that was owned by South Africans, right? So it's like completely opposite ends of the spectrum. It's about agility, I think, and adaptability, and really being able to alter your approach depending on the audience, right? And that takes, as Stephanie said, a level of awareness. But if I were to break it down to me at the core, the greatest obstacle was me actually believing that I belonged where I was for no other reason than my skill set. That was the first obstacle I needed to overcome. And I would say earlier in my career, it was a complete burden. Because first of all, people always typically expect in HR, it's always going to be women, right? And regardless of the industry you're in, that field is very much, if it's not equal, it's more women than men. But, I would carry that burden about being the only one, whether it's being the only Black or being the only Black woman, or even now, being the only Black gay woman. And I'll share a quick story because, it in addition to what Stephanie shared, it's also, I think, how you get comfortable with yourself. And in 2010, I was in between jobs, and I had left PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I decided that I wanted to cut my hair. And since I was a teenager, through my mid to late 30s, my hair was permed, and I wanted to completely shed that and show up authentically as me. And it was the most freeing and liberating exercise that I went through. And I know I'm not alone in thinking that, but, I tell this story often because it was a point of inflection for me. And when you think about obstacles, sometimes the obstacles that we create are the ones that we create. And if I had to pinpoint, the shift, this is where I made the shift to shift my thoughts, shift my energy, shift my, my approach. And I showed up more authentically, owning my hair, owning my space, and being completely apologetic. I led and assume positive intent. And to Stephanie's point, though, I continue to let my work speak for itself. That is equally important. So you have to invest in yourself. It just so happens, though, all right, that I love sports, as Stephanie mentioned. I love golf. I'm not that great at it, but I love it. I enjoy watching ESPN, and I like bourbon. And it just so happens that those things actually do lead to breaking down barriers, believe it or not. So be responsible with the bourbon, but I think it's really it's really just first believing in yourself and self-awareness and figuring out how to adapt and lead with your credibility and building those relationships one at a time.
I think what's really impactful to me based on what you guys are saying is just how do you look at quote unquote obstacles and then turn them into growth opportunities. And it seems that you guys have mastered that and skill, and it is based on your ability not to personalize things, but to own your greatness and push forward in it. And that is perfect, because it kind of leads into our next question, which is about courageous conversations, but it's just also courageous behaviors, right? So in courageous conversations around equity in the workplace, it sounds like a great idea, but it can really be tough to have those. And so I guess my question is, what are some of the common misconceptions about equity? What programs or practices have you implemented? And I think you guys have touched on some of that to engage leaders and employers in your respective companies. And I think part of what we heard before was, understanding yourself and things that you like and being able to use that as a bridge to kind of build some relationships. But if there's some other examples from a courageous conversation or courageous acts perspective that you want to share, I think that would be helpful.
I'll go first. In HR, often I tell leaders, look, stay away from provocative conversations. Don't get the company in trouble. Don't get yourself in trouble. Anything around race, politics, religion, we tend to shy away from. But we're all a product of our experiences, right? And in my opinion, the common misconception is that we are not talking about our lived experiences, right? And so there's an assumption that if you see one or two people of color that's in your organization that have made it, then you assume that they follow the path of the American dream, right? They went to college, they got a good job, they worked hard, but the American dream is very, very different than the American reality for people of color, right? Our experiences are never told in the workplace, and we still show up every day as if there's nothing going on, and we come to work prepared. So having courageous conversations is tough, but necessary. And one of the things that I was able to do recently in my current role at Veracast is we, through the help of my D&I lead, we partnered with Singleton. I don't know if many of you have ever heard of him. If not, I would encourage you to look him up. But he is the creator of Courageous Conversations. And we had the opportunity to invite him into our organization and led a series of sessions, opening the door to how we have courageous conversations, right? And these sessions were, beyond powerful. I mean, moving and eye-opening, and it really starts breaking down those barriers, right? Those obstacles that you talked about, Leah. And, I took a risk in bringing him into the organization. I'm here only 3 months at Veracast. I had no idea how it would be received, what the culture is. I'm still learning the norms, the processes, etc. But on the heels of the murder of George Floyd, I just felt compelled that I needed to do something different, right? And I remember, Stephanie, you made a great point. You said it's great to be in the room, but you also have to have a voice, right? So it's not just sitting at the table, it's having a voice. And my boss asked me, should we donate? Should we, make a statement? And I said, yes, but not now. If you're going to donate to me, right? Donate to me and the HR team, because I need to make sure that the work that we are doing is true to the statement that we make publicly, right? So if we are supporting equity and equality, and in our system, in our organization, we have gaps, then let's focus on that. So Blend was the first step in us doing some equity work, and we started with courageous conversations, and it's paid dividends, right? And the first 3 sessions we had over 95% participation, and
Wow.
now we are launching. Yeah, we are launching just now that work that I talked about, where we dig into the processes and how we recruit, how we train, enable, how we promote. There's absolutely no reason why I'm still looking across a conference room table and still seeing me, right, in 2020, right? And so I can't accept that. And so it's not about what we say, it's about what we do, and it's about building building guardrails and processes that can mitigate and challenge appropriately those individual decisions that then lead to inequity.
Wow. Steph?
I'll take it from 2 perspectives. One misconception to me is that people get intimidated by titles. If someone's an executive VP, a director, or however the hierarchy goes. And I find at the end of the day, if you look at everyone as it's somebody's mother, brother, sister, father, they're just people. And most leaders are approachable. We do want to hear from you. So don't be afraid to have courageous conversations. I was very much involved in the Women's Council. So I would say from a individual experience or personal experience, I always used my moments in those sessions with the leaders of the company. Again, this is at Citigroup, to voice my story or voice any challenges. I wasn't afraid to voice any challenges I thought I was having and moving forward in my career. Right. So in saying some things that are difficult to hear in terms of, are you really open to diversity of thought? Are we really, when we look at diversity, which I think is a great field to go in a much needed area. When you first looked at diversity, it looked at Blacks in the workplace. Over time, that field has grown and looks at all diversity. So I think Kimberly made a great point early on as well, when she wanted to look at the data, because it's not just about diversity. If you have 200,000 or 80,000 employees and you hire all of your employees in Asia, doesn't make you diverse, or India. So you need to look at the numbers within the numbers, especially in America. How are we doing with hiring Black women? Are doing much better than Black men, and there aren't that many of us. So how are we doing in this? It's not that we're not qualified, we're not out there. A lot of jobs are obtained through networking. So if you don't have a network inside, you don't have people pulling you in. So really sharing those discussions, whether they be with the entire group or different work groups, even courses like unconscious bias, which, by the way, most biases are very conscious. We all have them. About what's your commitment level to make sure you're not being biased in the workplace. And at Facebook is really a treasure in that they thrive on people that want to collaborate. They thrive on, if you find a problem, own it and fix it. It really has been a blessing for me. After 20 years at Citigroup, I was laid off. And you have a question down the road that I'll spend more time on, but I had a very difficult boss. And when I came to Facebook, you wonder about how you should dress because it's not corporate. Do I wear just come in jeans and a nice shirt? Do I wear a suit? Well, I chose to wear an informal suit and some high heels. And when the person that's now my boss, he came riding up to me on his little Facebook bike with this huge smile, I knew that was the right place for me after the last 5 years. So I went from managing the global team, having global responsibility, to consulting. But you don't have to be a director or MD to lead. You lead through influence. So I had to still feel that I lead. I have to make sure I be thoughtful of how I'm speaking in terms of, you may want to consider. Or maybe we could think about it this way. And in terms of courageous conversations at Facebook, I have a colleague, hopefully she's on, and she's great with people. And when someone gives you advice, if it's good advice, take it. So she has a good tenure at Facebook, and when I came in the door, they're like, if you want to know the Facebook way of interacting with leaders, make sure you listen to this person. And when I first came on board, I had my New York swag, and I would say, well, I don't think it should be this way. And the line she says to me that I still remember is, well, that's your Fifth Amendment right. So it took her several conversations, and I think I'm very thankful that she invested in me to get me to the term that you like to use there is pivot, so that I could not only survive, but thrive in that culture. So I guess to sum it up, don't be intimidated by titles. Don't be afraid to share your journey, but share it in a way that's positive. Share it in a way that's going to help the company improve. A lot of times with on a specific problem that I did speak on was recruitment. Generally, when banks recruit, they want to go to Columbia. They want to look at NYU. They want to go to Yale. Well, there are other colleges. Can we diversify that pool? Let's give everybody a shot. And that did lead to a change. So it's about, again, having a seat at the table, using it wisely to use your voice.
That's funny, Stephanie, that you were in with that, because something that just kept coming back to me was, use your voice. If you're in the room, we all have a responsibility to speak out, and your story matters, right? And one of the things I constantly say is that you can't hold people accountable for what you don't tell them, right? And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that sometimes we make. We make assumptions that because people have titles or in these roles, they know. But, we all have a responsibility to use our voice. So I'm going to keep the conversation going because this is good. We're getting amazing comments. Employers are being challenged more and more to address microaggressions against Black women in the workplace. Have you had an experience with microaggressions that stand out for you? How did you handle it? And what practices have you put in place as leaders to discourage the behavior and to bring awareness?
I'll take that one, I guess.
Okay.
I would say yes, definitely experienced it. Luckily, not till late in my career. Most my experience has been positive with leaders. I do want to say to everyone, there are going to be times through your journey where you have a great boss. That's one that's invested in you. Sometimes it's referred to as your godfather, invested in your career development, and willing to invest their time and share responsibility with you. You'll have good bosses. Meaning they're fair, they support you, but may not have the same investment as a great boss. You'll have a bad boss. That's one that's not too detrimental, but doesn't do anything to help promote your career. And you'll have a horrible boss. That's one that would probably like to see you not where you are. So my last 5 years at City, I would say I had a horrible boss. He had an issue with women, and then he had an issue with women of color. And a lot of times in these big firms, you change managers. So I had a manager that I did very well under for 12 years, 14 years. So a lot of times you get a new manager, they want to bring their own team in. It's natural. So how did I deal with it? And by the way, you can learn from every boss. There's something to take away from every boss. And I'm grateful for not the horrible experience, but I'm grateful for what I've learned from him. He used to get into work very early. When I say early, like 5:30, between 5:30 and 6 a.m. And I asked him one day, I said, I know we need to be aligned with the markets. Why do you come in so early? He goes, well, because that's when your brain is most active and you can be creative. So I'm in back-to-back meetings, so I'd rather get in early, and that's my think time. I said, oh, okay. So I started coming in 6:30, having coffee with him, sharing ideas. And he was always one to give me the most impossible goals. Stretch goals are impossible in my view. So I may not have achieved them 100%, but how did I move the needle? If it was on technology and or process efficiencies, whatever it was, I tried to deliver, and in some cases achieve what he was looking for. So I was able to get him to invest in me by me investing in him, to try and understand what makes him tick. What does he want for the program? He was more like, he really didn't care about the team. It really was more about his success. So how could I be a part of that journey? And I happened to have contacts with all of the business heads because I had that area in terms of corporate. So he would need me to meet with the head of legal. He would need me to meet with the head of HR to be that introduction way. Robotics was big at the time. Knowing the future state, as Kimberly says, knowing the business strategy. How are they using robotics? How can we get process efficiencies there? So, and he also, I learned from him to not be, if you want to grow your career, you have to be open to moving. Right now, I'm sitting in California, and something I never thought, I commuted to college, I've never been 30 minutes away from my family. And as much as many trials and tribulations I've had with him, I'm very grateful for that because I had this opportunity in California. I absolutely love it. I do miss my family though, and can't wait for this COVID to be over and fly home. And we'll talk about mentorship in a little bit, but I was very close with the head of the Women's Council. Citigroup had issue with women in general, so we all came in at the same time. And so it was interesting to maintain those relationships. Some people, I went from VP to director. Some people went from VP to managing director. So I had a good support system. And the piece of advice that she gave me that I carry to this day is no matter how right you think you are in a situation, you have to own your situation, right? You have to own it. If you have just like you take an English class, you think you write well, but your English teacher hates the way you write. You have to pivot a little bit to their style. Don't give up your personality, but you gotta meet them where they are and then get them to see you shine.
Nice. Kimberly, do you have something that stands out from the microaggression experience that you want to share?
For sure. I mean, I had, similar to Stephanie, I had a slew of examples, but I think more was on the back half of my career, right? And so, just simply put, though, there's no one magic bullet to combat microaggressions, right? There's no one answer for it. And so if you think about what I shared earlier around, building a system and ensuring a consistent and fair process, it still won't stop, but it sure as heck can mitigate some decisions, right? And so, I have one real example, recent, probably within the last 4 years. I was, my previous company, I was promoted from director of HR to VP of HR just for the US. I wasn't for the region. And my new boss, I had worked with alongside, supporting him from an HR business partner perspective for many, many years. And so the organization restructured and I was promoted into the VP of the US role from a different governing body, if that makes sense. So anyway, so this new boss refused to address my pay as a result of the promotion. Now, here's the ironic thing. I'm the VP of HR, which means I have access to data, current data, historical data. I know what everyone's being paid. I know what my predecessors were paid. And so rather than lead with that, I go back to data. I asked him to reevaluate my role because, coming at it with good intent, we did reorg, we did restructure. So while the role was still titled the same. Perhaps there was a change in how the organization was looking at the role. So I said, hey, can you reevaluate this role for me? And he did. He took my request and he sent it on to the regional folks, which at the time was responsible for compensation. And in the email, he said, and it was in quotes, this reevaluation should have zero impact on Kimberly's pay. And how did I find out about this? Because he wasn't savvy enough to then just have a conversation with me about the why. He chose to send the email that he sent with the result back to me. And I saw in the email his comments. And so long story short, that was, he wasn't a rookie, but that was a rookie move. So long story short, you know, he was later asked to leave the organization, and the new boss that came in adjusted my pay without me actually having to ask. But what that experience taught me, right? Again, if you go back to my previous comment around the system and the process, and even the HR team, we are the stewards of this process. And so if you send an email as a leader to a compensation director, basically telling the compensation director what they should or shouldn't do, that is their specialty, that they have the responsibility of making sure that regardless of what you look like, you're paid for the job and not what you look like. And so when I later took over the regional role, I made a change in the compensation team and basically made it very clear that no leader is the sole decision maker in compensation, right? We have a process in place. We have rules that we govern decision making around compensation. No one leader makes a decision about what one person should be paid. And so it inspired me again to really make sure that the team that works for me, that I represent as a discipline, is doing their job. Because ultimately, if you're complacent and you're sitting there, these things will continue to happen, right? That it goes back to that voice. It goes back to those obstacles. And so it was not only a learning opportunity for me, but now people that work for me, I assume good intent, but I also make sure that, you know, that we're employing the fair process. So we are not a part of the problem. We're part of the solution. There's a ton of stories I could share, but that was the one that that was the most, you know, just ironic because I owned the process, right? So there was no denying the facts, you know, to Stephanie's point, when people talk about pay, like I know what everybody gets. So it was very interesting that he chose to do it that way.
I think one of the things that really has me inspired right now in this conversation is each of you, you know, have these stories that you can share that may have deterred you or made you bitter, or you know, it's amazing to me that you have both taken these experiences and said, you know, how can I learn from this, and how am I going to use these experiences to empower me to do better? So I think that just speaks to both of you as leaders, and I'm inspired by that because we all have choices, right? And we could either choose to look at those experiences derogatory and become downtrodden and bitter, or we can use that same negative energy to sort of empower us to be better. And so I just want to say that I'm inspired by you both because we all are accountable for making our world better, our workplaces better. And the fact that you've both made that decision to make it better for someone that comes behind you, it's inspiring to me. So I just felt like I needed to make that point. So we are kind of moving. So I want to kind of get to these next couple of questions. So according to the Center for Workplace Leadership, 71% of Fortune 500 companies have mentoring programs. And I'm kind of looking at different questions and people want to know about mentoring programs. And all these companies believe investing in leadership capacity pays off in performance, productivity, and innovation. So what advice can you share with our audiences and, you know, for young Black professionals and even mid-career about how to access, you know, mentorship, and networking opportunities? I can
go first. I believe in the value of mentor relationships, right? At every level, right? And so I'm working now to bring a formal mentorship to my current organization. There's informal relationships. When you really formalize it, you can tie it back to some of those things that you talked about, Mia. What advice would I give? I would share that no matter the level, like you can find someone in your community that can mentor you, right? And so seek out, if your company today doesn't have a formal mentoring program, seek out someone that you admire. That, Stephanie made a great point about modeling behaviors, and I'm summarizing, but in a sense, you alter how you approach different environments, and those are things that you learn by watching and learn by having someone that you can reach out to that you feel comfortable enough in asking those questions. Not your manager, but someone in your organization that you trust. And also then, there's also community leaders, right? Teachers, former professors. You just never know, who wants to be able to help and advance someone's career, right? And so, if you never know, if you never ask, I should say, the answer is always no. But I do believe that at every level that there's opportunity for a relationship to form, mentor-mentee relationship to form.
Stephanie?
I have a different view. I definitely support mentorship, but I think it's most important to you would get more out of a relationship when you do decide or select someone to learn from or share their experiences with, if you build a relationship with that person versus asking them to be a mentor. Have a reason to have a discussion. And the discussion, that first initial conversation does not necessarily have to be work related. It could be about current events. It could be about market trends. Look around the workspace. Do you have anything in common, or does that person play tennis, golf? Do they like Serena? I'm a huge tennis fan, so any person talking to me about Serena and then is asking me a work question, I'm definitely going to be disarmed and want to help that person because we have similar interests. So versus a lot of times when you have the formal mentorship programs and you have busy people and they say, okay, we'll have to mentor someone on my calendar, it becomes a task. You don't want it to be a task, you want it to be a relationship. That's very important. I don't have anyone in my career that I could say was my mentor. I have a relationship with those great bosses that I still talk to this day. When I leave Facebook, I will still definitely talk to the person there. So it's really about establishing a connection and a relationship. And not only look for mentors, but be a mentor. Be a positive influence in your community, in your family. Some of these stories that I'm sharing with you, I wish my family members would sit down and take the time to listen to, or not hang up the phone when I'm saying, don't quit school. It's going to go by fast. You need that paper to get in the door. So, and there's things depending on your family. I had a cousin, 85. She was 85. Cousin Thelma. I don't know if Sandy's on, but if she is, Cousin Thelma. She's like, can you take me to my old job? I said, well, if you remember how to get there, I'll take you. So I took her. We went in. She happened to clean houses. And the person she worked for opened the door, didn't know she was coming, started crying. When she got in the house, she sat down. The woman said to her, my son lives in Florida. He doesn't talk to me. My cousin Thelma picked up the phone, called the son, and actually yelled at him. So we get back in the car, and she said to me, no matter what job you have, you take pride in your work. So it's not only about what I represent in terms of other people coming after me, but is what am I representing to my family? What is our brand? What is our future? If I want to influence them, I have to walk the talk too. So invest in people, and they'll invest in you.
I love that. So I can't believe how quickly this time. I can talk to you guys forever, but we have one more question I really want to get in because this is really about giving tips. And I think you guys, in answering that question is challenging people to open up their perspectives of what mentorship looks like, right? And I appreciate that because it's just storytelling and the exchange of social capital that's invaluable, and just sharing that and having that exchange is really what people, I think, crave. So, I'm still going to ask the question, do you have kind of best practice tips? We've heard a lot of great things from you guys, but like sort of what is the takeaway with women? When you share with women across the career spectrum, whether it's entry-level roles to mid-career or C-suite, to kind of foster equity through leadership, what best practices do you want folks to take away? Or would you like to share with them?
Kim, you want to go first on that one?
Oh, sure. Wow. Couple things. I would say join a professional organization, something in your career to start, right? And you don't always have to pay money. There's a ton of them on LinkedIn. So start to connect with people in your field. Not all require money. The second thing is what we just talked about, getting a mentor. So relationship, whether it's formal, informal, someone that you can lean on to get advice, someone that you aspire to be and can help guide you with decisions. I have 2 or maybe even 3 former leaders that were my mentors that I can still call on today for any question. And none of them are in HR, by the way. Commit to your personal growth, right? That has to be a commitment. You have to continue to invest in yourself. Build your network, volunteer your time, give your resources to organizations that matter to you. And to, Stephanie's earlier point, while you're seeking out mentorship, also be available to mentor as well. Mentee should also be available to mentor. If I could go back in time, I would give that same advice to myself. But now I share that with my son. I share those tips with the youth in my family, and basically anyone that'll listen, I'll give a tip to. Right. So, but I think for me, those are some just things that I've done consistently in my career, and I've found that leaders that I admired have the same sort of behaviors and guidance. So those would be my quick tips.
Awesome. And Stephanie, do you have some quick tips for us?
Sure. Kimberly touched on one of them. First thing I want to say, when you're looking for work, whether you have a job, looking for a better job, or you're just starting your career, don't always go by the job description. If you're interested in it, apply for it. Don't automatically think, oh, well, I don't have this one. I'm not good with developing databases, or I have everything but this one thing. Apply to it, because there's an it factor. It's not necessarily everything that when you're looking for a job, the person hiring you is also looking to see if you fit within their organization, if you fit within their team. So don't be afraid to apply for them. And number 2, don't be afraid of rejections. In between my job from Citigroup to Facebook, I applied for over 500 jobs.
Wow.
And it's not a personal, it has not, keep your confidence. You know who you are, you know what you can do. So keep that. And then when you have a big deliverable, reflect back on your life and think, why am I nervous? What have I ever failed at before? Hopefully you haven't failed at anything major. Usually you haven't. So you can do it, right? So you're capable of more than you think you are. And the last thing I would say, well, 2 more things. One is find the balance. Because the stress does affect your health. I'm a cancer survivor, which occurred during that 5-year period of that horrible loss. So there is a correlation between stress and your health. So find the balance, whether it be volunteering, cooking, whatever relaxes you, make sure you do that. I forgot the last thing. But really, it's really about have the confidence, apply for everything. Oh, know the time, know the moment of the time. Like right now, you might think of everyone's working from home. We have these major things going on. We have highest unemployment rate, whatever. ever, how am I going to find a new job? How am I going to find a job? People are finding jobs. Look at how the moment is changing the workforce. So you're going to find you need more doctors, you need more lawyers, you need more physicians, assistants, technicians. You need space planning for offices because now we have to be X amount of feet apart. So there is an opportunity. You may invent something that'll make me feel comfortable flying because I have a face mask that you there's always opportunity. Don't get discouraged. And your circle of friends, very important. Very important that you have a circle of friends outside of work. If you're not happy with your job, you don't want to be the person that's always negative, always complaining about it. Yes, you need to vent. Do it outside of work. It has to have friends that are real with you, and if you're faithful, that walk strong in faith. Your faith comes into doubt. You're not operating your best. Someone that could say, "Hey, Stephanie, really could handle that better." Not everyone has to agree with every work story you're telling them. So those are my points of advice.
Well, I just want to formally thank both Stephanie Jackson and Kimberly Sisnet for sharing, your personal stories with us, and just giving us insight to what your journey has been as a Black woman leading through an equity lens. Your stories were powerful, and we really appreciate you spending this time with us this evening. I want to thank our participants and our allies for joining this conversation. Unfortunately, we didn't get to all the questions, but hopefully we can have you back. So for all of you who are not AAUW members, I encourage you to visit us at aauw.org to learn more about what we're doing, these professional development and educational programs. If you enjoyed it, I would encourage you to donate so that we can continue to have these our courageous conversations. And again, thank you so much. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.